Okay, we're now back in the studio, and I've brought in today's piece of work to talk to you a little bit about it. One thing is, this is a plein air piece. Now, it took me a considerable amount of time to understand that in plein air work, there needed to be a certain unfinished or spontaneity look to it that gave it its energy. And Edward Degas said that the frame is the artist's reward. One of the things is that often paint strokes and marks like this will look less finished. And when we're out in the field, we'll want to finish them and finish them and finish them. But let me show you something here, if I may. Watch what happens to this painting. And again, this is my reward when we put the frame up against it. You see how remarkably finished it seems to be? It takes it almost another 20%. And the important thing is that when we're out in the field, we keep that in mind, because the tendency is to want to refine things out there in a way that we would do in the comfortability of our studio. And that is not the purpose of a good plein air piece. The good plein air piece, to me, as I spoke to you about the two Russian paintings of the tractor driver, has an energy and a synergy all of its own. So when you're out there working, step back from your painting from time to time and ask yourself if the passage isn't more finished than you thought it was, and if you can't leave it alone. In a sense, less is more. And if you can step away and recognize that, it will help you to move along with your painting and come to a quicker, more articulate completion. We're in the studio, and I thought if I could take a moment and talk to you about my pastel box and my pastels. Naturally, it's a common question as to what kind of pastels I use, what brands, what colors, and so forth. So I thought I would take just a few minutes and go through this with you. I have a mixed box of pastels. I don't choose pastel by brand. I choose pastel colors to help me achieve the effects of light that I want to achieve. Originally, I started with Rembrandt pastels, but I felt I needed a deeper range, particularly in the dark browns and dark purples and dark reds. So I added to my original grouping of Rembrandts some Senneliers. Then, as I continued to paint outdoors and learn what I needed, I brought into play some unison darks with some unison blues and a marvelous set of Terry Ludwig darks and Ludwig greens. Again, I don't choose a pastel based on brand. I choose a pastel based on color. One of the things that I used to do when I went out into the field was I would go out and I probably took maybe 600 or 700 colors. I felt that if I could find just the right color, I could do the right thing. I learned fairly early on that the really purpose behind where I wanted to go needed to be more this kind of thinking. Rather than find the right color to do the right thing with the colors I had. I used to have a box for portrait, a box for landscape. Now I have just this box. These are colors that I have chosen over the years. They fit me just like my shoes or my short or my jeans. And in your journey, as you continue to learn to paint from life and capture the effects of light, you will discover colors, and these colors will become personal to you. And that's how I suggest you build your pastel box. Now, you may find certain brands that work better for you, and that's absolutely fabulous, and you should do that. But be sure, for one thing, that in pastel you have enough dark colors, because the values outdoors, in order to capture this effect of light, you have to have enough darks. Now, there is one other thing that you'll see that goes on in my pastel box. There's a method to my madness. You'll see that I not only have my colors grouped in warms and browns, and then cools and greens, and my Ludwig greens, and blue unisons and darks over here. But if you'll notice, I go from light to dark, light to dark, light to dark, light to dark. And there's a purpose in that. The very most important thing we can do as painters in trying to capture this effect of light is to get the values correct. So what this allows me is this. Let's say I grab this pastel here and I go to put it on the painting and it's too dark. Then all I do is move to the left and pick up one slightly lighter. If I had put it up there and it was too light, I'd move to the right and pick one up slightly darker. You see, when I'm painting, I don't think color first. I think value first. I was taught that you could put just about any color anywhere if it was the right value. So I'll grab something if I'm struggling just to keep the painting moving. I'll grab something that's a good value to go in an area, and it might be pretty foreign color to that area. Then, once I've got it in and I've got the value relationships worked out, I'll take another color that's of the same value and scumble it over top. That will bring it into the color range I want. But it's important that it's the same value and doesn't change its value. It can change its temperature, but not its value. So, my suggestion would be to you, particularly if you're using pastel, is to be careful not to fall in the trap of searching out just the right color. Remember that the parameters in the search that you're making is based in value. Value first, color second. It served me well. I think it'll serve you well also. Drawing is a very integral part of painting, and particularly when it comes to painting the figure, you aren't going to be able to paint what you can't draw. Now, pretty early on, when I left the field of illustration, I was starting to draw again from life after many, many years respite from art college. And something occurred to me, a wonderful thought. When I signed my name, I signed it with such confidence and with such relaxation. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to draw that way? And I said to myself, well, if I want to draw that way, then I have to do what I've done in signing my name. I've signed it hundreds of thousands of times for a long time. Unfortunately, there are no shortcuts. If you want to learn to draw well, you're going to have to practice. Practice takes time. It also takes confidence that your hard work will pay off. But I will guarantee you it will. So practice. If you're not painting on a day, draw. Learn. And perhaps you also might want to consider whether you couldn't finally come to a point in drawing where you can draw as freely as you sign your name. While we were still in the studio, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about drawing. One of the things that I find most important in drawing is to be able to see the colors. And I find that drawing is a very important part of drawing. Now, particularly when it comes to painting the figure, you aren't going to be able to paint what you can't draw. So I always tell my students that you can go out and draw a tree and draw a branch or a limb in a little bit off and nobody will know the difference. However, if you draw an arm and you make it too long, or if you're drawing a face or a head and the eye is off on one direction, most novices can recognize that immediately. So we're going to be doing plein air figure painting, and I want you to understand the importance of the fact that you cannot paint what you can't draw when it comes to the figure. So if you were to set a goal for yourself in trying to do plein air figure painting, that you would combine it with some drawing practice, I think that you would really, really reap the benefits. These are examples of drawings that I do that are done also outdoors, plein air. I just use Contact crayon and white chalk on a piece of toned paper. And when I do drawings like this, they are specifically meant to help me with my plein air painting of the figure, so that when I'm out there, I'm not struggling with the drawing as much as I am with all the other things that you are facing and fighting, like changing light and wind and rain or anything of that nature. But it also helps me learn to capture movement and what we call an organic feel to the figure, which is a connectedness. Okay, these drawings are purposely kept short. They aren't meant to be great drawings that are going to go in frames, but they're meant to teach me to move along fast and how to develop a figure fairly quickly. And the white chalk is just a way of adding it and bringing it into the realm of a painter. So I don't divorce my drawing from my painting. Anything that I do in drawing, I try and do it in a way that it will integrate itself into painting. So for example, you can see that, I treat things as shapes. This shadow is a big shape. This hair is a shape over here. And I'm very careful with the white in terms of on the flesh tone. Highlights on living, breathing flesh are a lot less dramatic than you think they are. So I'm just studying these things and see, I'm combining shapes. This could have been a black kerchief, I don't know, but it was a dark kerchief. But I don't break that shape up. And when I go to do the painting outdoors, I want to make sure, even though I've moved into color, that I still adhere to those kinds of things. You can see where I'm softening areas and blending them, or where I might put a crisp line to indicate a hard edge and yet lose an edge there or lose an edge there. I think that everything we do as an artist contributes to our artistic expression, and drawing is always an integral part of good painting. So set a goal for yourself to do a little bit of drawing each week in conjunction with your painting, and it will yield great things in your art. I thought what we could do is talk a little bit about the principles of the effect of light. When you're outdoors painting, it is challenging enough to be dealing with all of the changing factors. So it helps if before you go out, you have a good idea in your mind about the effects of light and what occurs. This is a little diagram that I made for my workshops. And we use this in a PowerPoint lecture to explain a few things. I actually did this little yellow ball out on our porch in broad sunlight in order to be able to explain the effect of that kind of light. We must understand that everything we see is due to light bathing itself on objects. If it is a very direct sun, it's a warm light that's crisp and it casts dramatic shadows. If it's an overcast day, then it's a cooler light, it's a softer light with more diffuse shadows. But there are certain principles that hold true in all, either of those two lighting scenarios, and for that matter in all lighting scenarios. One of the things is is that we have a form, and as light strikes it, because the form is opaque, it creates a shadow. This is what's called the form shadow because it tells us the form of the object, the shape that it takes. That same object casts a shadow, and that's self-explanatory. Form shadows are almost always soft. Cast shadows have crisper edges. Of course, if this was a cloudy day painting and I had done this ball outdoors in a cloudy day, this cast shadow would be soft and more diffused. But the principle that holds true, whether it's a cloudy day in a cool light or a sunny day in a warm light, is that whenever a form travels away from the light and down completely away from any light, whether it be direct light or reflected light back in, it warms up. Now, I've over-exaggerated here for making a point in my workshops, but I have a rich, deep red here with a hot red there. Then, as this shadow travels out, on a sunny day there's a deep blue sky above, and that deep blue sky can exert its influence on the cast shadow. So as the shadow travels out, it cools. Now there's another little principle, and you'll particularly see this in sunny day paintings when painting figures, is that there's a core to a shadow, to the form shadow. And that core is right at the point where the form turns from light to shadow. That core happens to be quite often a little bit purple, and it also is darker. Because see, what's happening is there's reflected light influence here, and as this ball turns this way, that reflected light has less influence. So right in here is a core. Now the most important principle of painting, whether it's outdoors, plein air, studio, or anything, any nature of painting, is that you understand that there are two realms in light. One is the light, and the second is the shadow. This realm is the light, and this realm is the shadow. Nothing in either of these realms should ever compete equally. So you never want to get anything in here that's going to be as light. One of the biggest pitfalls that I see in my students' work is that they will bring in these reflected lights and they will get them as light in value as the light. You know, think of this. The reason that you can recognize a person's face from across a football field is not because you can read eyelashes or you can see skin texture. It's because you can tell the form of the face. And light in the natural world is always truthful. It will not, without being purposely designed to do so, break the truth of the two realms of light and shadow. So that's why when we see a person from way across a football field, and it's a sunny day, or even for that matter a cloudy day, we can recognize the face because the form is held true. And that's our job as painters. Keep the light in the light, and anything that's in the shadow, whether it's the form or the cast shadow, in the shadow. Remember that principle, and it will serve you well as a representational painter. The other thing I just want to talk about real quickly is that color is relative. I don't teach color theory because I believe you can observe outdoors or in plein air everything you need to learn about color, but also because color is relative. And you can see here where I have taken this color here, which looks pretty warm against this white, this tan. It is actually surrounding this highlight here, and against the yellow ball it looks cool. The same principle holds here. Look at this purple or violet against the white. It's rather cool. But once I've placed it here on top of the warm green, it actually feels warm. And here are the colors that were used in the cast shadow. The dark green, this lavender, which, deep, probably deep ultramarine, and this is close to an alizarin. I think most important is to understand this principle. Separate light and shadow, and then understand what happens to the temperature, so that anything you do in these realms are only temperature changes and they are not value changes. And now I'd like to share with you some paintings that I've completed recently. These paintings were finished completely on site at the time of the painting, and they are combinations of different lighting scenarios, sunny days and cast shadow days. Please enjoy, and thank you for coming along. One of my favorite periods of painting is one that occurred in the 20th century. It's been called at times Russian Impressionism, but it's also known as Socialist Realist painting. I'd like to highly recommend this book by Matthew Colburn Bone titled Socialist Realist Painting. But one of the things I'd like to show to you in here is a very interesting set of paintings. Inside this book, fairly early on in my plein air painting attempts, I found examples of these two paintings by the Russian painter Konstantin M. Maximov. They are both titled Sashka, the Tractor Driver. It's my belief that the painting on the left was done plein air and the painting on the right was done in studio, probably from the plein air study, maybe combined with photography. I have no idea, no way of knowing. But what this did for me was allow me to accept in my own mind the validity of the painting on the left, the energy that it carried that wasn't in the painting on the right, the spontaneity, the actual feel of Sashka coming in off of the field, perhaps the smell of the field or the sweat of the day. Certainly the painting on the right is a wonderful painting too, and it holds a very interesting compositional change, as you can see. But I thought, for myself, if I had my choice, I would want to make the painting on the left and leave the painting on the right for another situation. What do you think?